Because everything is invested with excitement. In an addictive relationship, you're blind to danger. In an addiction, you will listen to the desperate, needy side of yourself rather than to the intuitive adult side. Often your friends will show you the adult way of responding, but you don't listen to that because you're responding to that little kid energy of desperation. I've just got to have it. Someone says, but it has no future. That doesn't matter because only now matters. This fix right now. I've got to have it right now. You can't be told anything. You won't listen to voices of warning. And you're hooked coming and going. You're hooked when you come in and you're hooked while you're breaking up. You're just as hooked while you're breaking up. It still goes on. And you can't make a decision. The only way to work with this, of course, as I'll get to, is a 12-step program. Because you have no willpower left. Now, how would this happen? How could it be that we would get into addictive relationships? Well, first of all, it has something to do with what we were taught about being in love. We were taught when you hear the bells and whistles, that tells you it's real. When you get all excited, that tells you it's real and you're in love. You're not sick, you're just in love. But actually, the bells are the alarms to take cover. Because when it's healthy, it doesn't happen like that. It happens like a visit to the quiet lake. It happens like He leadeth me beside the still waters. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. It happens like that. Not like hurt me, desert me, deceive me, so forth. If you have no internalized nurture in parents, then you have nobody to protect you. And so you're always open to the possibility of falling into this type of addictive arrangement. See, most of us leave our childhood with a tremendous emptiness inside of us because our needs weren't fulfilled there. We always felt a sense of loss all through it, as Emily Dickinson says. A loss of something ever felt I. The first that I could recollect, bereft I was. Of what I knew not. Too young that any should suspect, a mourner walked among the children. I, notwithstanding, went abroad, as one bemoaning a dominion, itself the only prince cast out. Elder today, a session wiser, and fainter too as wiseness is, I find myself still softly searching for my delinquent palaces. And a suspicion, like a finger, touches my forehead now and then, that I am looking oppositely for the sight of the kingdom of heaven. That says it all. First, she says, I always felt a loss, but I didn't know what I had lost. I was like a prince with no kingdom, but I didn't remember where my kingdom was. So I started looking in other people. And late in life, I found out it's not there. I'm looking in the opposite direction. It's in here. So you leave childhood feeling empty, and that's the emptiness to fill from within. And what do you fill it in with? A nurturant, self-parenting power. Not someone else who will make me feel good. So you're cast out on this empty sea and you're looking for an island paradise. But there is no Bali. There's only you. And of course you only find this paradise when you finally look within. And when you look within and see the emptiness, the first thing you want to do is grieve for it. You want to cry about this desolation. Cry about how deserted you felt. And after many tears and after much mourning, you finally let go of blaming anybody for it and just saying, hey, that's my story, that's my human condition. Where do I go from here? When you emerge with the where do I go from here, now having within you the power to take care of yourself, nobody could ever be the object of your addiction because you don't have the power in you to be addicted. It has been taken away with all your other shortcomings by a power greater than yourself. What is that power? It's the power to take care of yourself and believe that nobody else has to do that for you. So you let everybody off the hook, parents included. And then you realize that you can only really possess what you're not possessed by. I guess this is why Rumi has this little poem, which I always found so utterly wise. My amorous play with my favorite is the cause of all the veils I have made. My sexual fun with my favorite partner, that fun is behind all the ways I have of avoiding my own reality. That's how I distract myself and console myself so that I never have to notice the emptiness inside. Not always like that, but that's the experience that he's relating. My amorous play with my favorite is the cause of all the veils I have made. So what works? The 12-step program, because you turn your will and your lives over to a power greater than yourself. And of course, the object of your addiction is greater than yourself, so you have to find some other power. I recommend a relationship sponsor, since you can't really see clearly. By relationship sponsor, I mean somebody who has to clear all your decisions. And you call her or him up and say, well, he just called. He wants me to go to the nude beach with him. And what should I do? And she says, don't go. Go to a meeting instead. And that's exactly what you do. I'm serious. Because you can't do this on your own. You can't do it on your own. You have to have somebody helping you. So for a while, you may even have to have somebody else make your decisions, just until you get clear. Okay, questions on this? Patrick? They have, don't they have Sexaholics Anonymous? They have Relationships Anonymous. They have Codependence Anonymous. There are many different programs here. They don't, those stages, the stages of relationship apply to two people, not to yourself. The stages of your own working on yourself are the stages of grieving and letting go of the past and becoming nurturant toward yourself by taking care of yourself, not letting yourself be hurt, not looking for that which isn't there in places where it isn't. You're consoling and distracting yourself from your own reality. And your own reality may be gut-wrenching sad. And you may never confront your own sadness because you're so afraid of it. If you never do, of course, then you'll never do the work that it takes to become healthy. You'll always be softly searching for delinquent palaces, looking oppositely for the sight of the kingdom of heaven. You'll always wind up with hurt me, desert me. I'm just a prisoner of love. For one command I stand and wait now, to one who's master of my fate now. I need no shackles to remind me I'm just a prisoner of love. Anyway, do you want to hear a story? We need a break, so this one will help. Now, this is one that I wrote to help us understand this subject, plus the issue of projection. Some of you have heard this before, but I think you'll enjoy it. It's called Hortense Bound, as in Prometheus Bound. With sweaty hands and furtive sidelong glances left to right, Horace pursues a new arrival at his local bookstore. He finds himself strangely drawn to this coffee table edition of Whips and Chains, an illustrated history of sadomasochistic proclivities and activities. Horace has never had a sexual experience with another person, and his fantasy life is therefore replete with images of a curious and unusual variety. This book seems made to order, but his rigid moral righteousness insulates him from truly knowing the full breadth of his own salacious desires. His fantasy life has never been permitted to evolve into plans, actions, or even conscious wishes. But today, his colluding ego supplies the ideal solution to the quandary of wanting to read every word of this book and not being allowed morally to own it. His friend Horatio has a birthday tomorrow. He can buy the book, read it, and then give it to Horatio, who, he has always suspected, is an aficionado of this type of lurid material. The unsuspecting and ingenuous Horatio, on the day after his birthday, still wonders what possessed Horace to give him a book like this. He has no interest in the subject matter and has never felt drawn to submission or dominance in the history of his own relationships with women. In fact, the only thing in the book that did catch his eye was the reproduction of a Renaissance painting of Saint Sebastian. The holy martyr is shown in his traditional pose, stripped, tied to a post, and pierced with arrows. The picture faced the chapter entitled, "The Secret Wish to be Tied Up." Horatio, in his characteristically fastidious way, carefully razors this picture out, intending to frame it and to hang it in the laundry room, an appropriate place, since one of its main appeals to him is that Saint Sebastian looks so clean and so neatly tied. So he hangs it there without the frame. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Horatio, his neighbor Hortense has long cherished an overwhelming obsession with him. She finds Horatio an endless source of fascination. She is convinced he can keep every promise of sexual and personal satisfaction that has hitherto been unkept in her feckless existence. Horatio is everything that she ever wanted in a man, though she has seen him face to face only once, as he was cleaning his septic tank, at which time he was so absorbed in his work he hardly noticed her, and certainly did not thereafter think of her. Though she has attempted in manifold coquettish ways to commandeer his attention over these months, he has remained oblivious of her. The frustrated yearning for contact impelled her one day, while he was away at work, to prowl around his house for some more personal sense of his identity. In the process of performing this exploratory rite, she noticed a book on a pile of newspapers in the recycling basket. Whips and Chains, an illustrated history of sadomasochistic proclivities and activities. What more revealing clue could she have found to the mind of her mystery man? Seizing the book, looking furtively from left to right, to be sure no neighbors were spying on her, she hid it under the copious folds of her apron on which she had embroidered, "Hortense hates housework." During the ensuing weeks, Horatio occasionally heard strange noises from next door. Was that the clinking of chains? Was that someone falling from a makeshift sling suspended from the ceiling? He could not guess. They were all only dull thuds to him. Hortense, meanwhile, was hard at work becoming just the kind of lover she now knew Horatio wanted. She spent extra time upgrading her knot-tying skills, since she had noticed that he had cut out a page from the book that she presumed must have illustrated that art. On one of her later secret visits to Horatio's house, Hortense did not deduce the identity of the missing page to be that of the picture she saw hanging in the laundry room. The agonized ecstasy on the face of that bizarre character tied to a post provided her final evidence of the nature of Horatio's longings. Hortense was now convinced undeniably that he wanted desperately to be dominated, tied, and altogether bound to her. Soon thereafter, unbeknownst to Hortense, Horatio left town. He was joining his fiancée, a fellow pacifist, for a workshop on the subject that had long captivated both their imaginations, nonviolence in politics and in relationships. He asked Horace to house sit for him, since of late he had uneasily wondered whether there might be prowling in the neighborhood. Once ensconced in the house, Horace looked in vain for Whips and Chains, an illustrated history of sadomasochistic proclivities and activities. He did, however, see the tormented Saint Sebastian, who seemed vaguely familiar. But since, like Hortense, he was ignorant of Christian iconography, he thought this picture only confirmed his long-held suspicion that Horatio had quite outrageous tendencies indeed. Meanwhile, synchronicities were swarming for Hortense. She now knew the ropes of submission and dominance in relationships, and she had a house well equipped for their use. At the same time, at an adult education class she was attending, she had learned to be assertive and to use the affirmation, "I ask for what I want." So everything was conspiring to make her ready to knock at Horatio's front door in full black leather to invite him over for coffee. When the door opened that fateful evening, it was Horace and not Horatio who greeted the chagrined Hortense. Their eyes met, and at first, as was their mutual wont, they furtively shifted them from left to right, but then their enchanted gazes locked in what for Hortense was love at first sight, and what for Horatio was the first love of his life. There was no coffee served that night. Horace was too absorbed in trying out every sling, handcuff, and Iron Maiden in the house of Mistress Hortense. Too obsessed with each other to wait for a June wedding, Horace and Hortense tied the knot on January 20th, a date of interest to Horatio, their best man, since, as surely only he realized, This was the feast of his patron Saint Sebastian. That's the start. So, questions? You get the idea? How you can imagine certain things that aren't actually real and have plenty of evidence and be hooked on an illusion when the object is just the opposite of what you thought. Okay, questions on anything about relationship addiction before we go on? Yes. He's saying that operas are based on relationship addictions, which is certainly true. That's why there's so much bloodshed. And what makes them popular is that we all know that that's in us too, that we have that kind of inclination, and sometimes we even envy the people who have such strong feelings. See, as long as you imagine that your lively energy is somehow bound up with some other person or with finding the right person or with sex, then you never really contact your actual lively energy, which is an intensely spiritual and creative thing that could happen in the context of relationship, but has 99 other ways of happening too. That's why my amorous play with my favorite is the cause of the veils I have made. So anyway, I think we find it appealing because it's in us, and secondly, it's good to see somebody else going through it rather than us, because it is so painful. Okay, other comments or questions on this? Okay. So, now let's just say a word about intimacy, which is our next subject, so that we can finally move into the more serious part of our subject. Now it's time to know what intimacy really is. It's a mutual bond. So it has to be mutual. There's no such thing as I'm intimate and he isn't. It's a mutual bond of commitment. And we know what commitment is. The series of handled obstacles and kept agreements. A mutual bond. So it's bond. Hence both. Mutual bond of commitment to give and receive love. That's my definition. Here's a quote from Plato. In our original condition, we were whole. Love is the name for the desire and pursuit of that wholeness. We began as whole, and love is the way we recapture it. So it's intimate when there's a mutual bond, and it's a commitment to give and receive love. And what has to be in place for this to happen? You'd have to have worked through some of your childhood material. You'd have to have weathered some of the conflict stage of the relationship, and you'd have to have the ability to accommodate the other person's fears and foibles. That's mirroring. If you have those three things going for you, then intimacy is possible. If you haven't ever worked on yourself, you've never confronted the ghosts of your childhood, you can't handle somebody else's fears and foibles, you have absolutely no tolerance for that, and you haven't worked through any conflicts, you haven't handled any obstacles together, then it seems as if intimacy is not quite ready to happen. So now let's just take these features one by one. First of all, it's mutual. So it can't be one-sided. Secondly, let's start with mutual and then go to the last word, which is love. It's a mutual bond, a commitment to give and receive love. This love is shown in highly individualized ways. There's no such thing as love is. Like love is never having to say you're sorry, or love is hot toddy on a cold night. You see, love is highly subjective. You read it only in the language that you learned it in. In adulthood, love is a re-experiencing of the love that you originally experienced in childhood. In fact, Freud says, every relationship in adult life recreates the original relationship. The discovery of love is a rediscovery. So this means that we know how we felt love originally by how we feel love now, and we receive it only as we already received it. So what you have to figure out is what made you feel loved originally in your life, and do you feel that way now with this partner? Because here's an important distinction. You may know that the other person loves you. You may hear the other person say that he loves you. No problem. The important issue is, do you feel loved? You will have to feel it in your body, not through sex. You just feel that that person loves you. And sometimes you could know the person loves you but never feel it, in which case you don't have real intimacy. Everybody follow? Now, I remember in my childhood that I knew that my grandmother loved me, and I knew that the way she showed it was simply by staying with me. Like at night she would take care of me while my mother was at work, and we would do puzzles together. And I could tell that since she was an Italian immigrant, she didn't really have a knowledge of this Dick Tracy scene that I was putting together here. And she didn't really understand when I was listening to Baby Snooks on the radio. She didn't really understand what they were saying because they speak so quickly. She didn't know that much English. I could tell that she was enjoying just being with me, enjoying my company, and enjoying the fact that I was happy with these little pleasures that I had, simple though they were. And I felt loved by the fact that she stayed with me, and stayed with me at a time when I wasn't particularly interesting. And later in life, I could tell that that's how I look for people to love me as an adult. So I started to notice that at a family picnic, for instance, when the other guys are out there playing baseball or cooking weenies and so forth, that it's more like me to sit with the old ladies and just kind of be present with my aunts, the aunts that now remain, who are old women now. And I just sit there even now, in middle age, I can sit there and feel very good just by the fact that we're all staying together and they're just there with me, and I feel loved by them. It doesn't matter that some are crippled and can't get up. It's just that I believe that they're there because they want to be with me. And so I can be easily fooled, but that doesn't matter because it still feels good. Then I started to notice that when I would spend time with people, especially in a romantic setting, a romantic situation, the other person might say, well, let's go to a movie, and I would say, no, let's just stay home. And of course what I wanted was, yeah, just stay home and be with me here in this boring setting, and that's going to make me feel loved. So I could even see how I started to manipulate people to get them to stay because I'm craving that kind of love. What kind of love? The only kind of love that I learned, and the kind that feels real to me. Now, if I'm going to be honest, I should say that to a prospective partner. I should say, this is what makes me feel loved. If you want to do something nice for me, all you have to do is stay with me during an evening and not have to go out and do a lot of activities. I feel very good when somebody just calmly stays with me. I remember seeing this movie, The Night of the Iguana, and Richard Burton was tied to a hammock because he was so out of control. And his friend Ava Gardner had taken off down the beach with her boyfriends. There was nobody there except Deborah Carr. And she said to him, she said, I know you're having a hard time, and I'm going to sit here beside you all night. I'm going to sit here and have some tea with you, and we can talk, and that's to help you get through the night. I'll stay with you. Well, when I heard her say that, I was like completely wrapped and focused and drawn into it. I felt so good. And I thought later, well, she's just recreating my original childhood scene. She's just going to stay there. Even if I'm tied in a hammock and I can't entertain at all, she's willing to stay. You see? So, I imagine that everybody in here had a certain way of being loved, and that this is your highly specific signature of love, of how to receive it. And when you meet someone who loves you in that particular way, who happens upon this sealed door, who stumbles upon it and opens it, and loves you that way, you will believe that you're really being loved. And it could be that the person does love you, or it could also be that it's only a coincidence and that it's not going to go on, that it just happened in that moment. So love isn't a feeling, it's a conscious choice to give and receive this specialized way of feeling loved. And if you are able to receive it, that means you did receive it originally. Because when you originally receive it, with it comes the capacity to receive it. And imprinted in your psyche, as if it were stamped with a seal, is this specific way of being loved. When someone else comes along who has that same seal and places it just the right way, then you feel it's real. Because love is subjective, it's not objective. Everybody follow what I mean? So, you might be trying to get someone to prove their love in the specific way that you need it when they don't even know what that specific way is. So one of your important disclosures is to figure out what makes you feel loved and to tell the other person about it. Okay, question before we close? Somebody had a question? Her question is, what if you never received love? It's not so much that it's not so much how early, it's whenever you first felt loved by someone. Everyone felt loved by someone at some time. That first experience is the landmark experience that places in you this template of being loved, and you'll feel it that way ever after. So it doesn't have to be in your early childhood, it could be at any time. Okay, I can answer that for myself. He says, wouldn't you feel like a child? And yes, you feel, you have the warmth and innocence of your childhood come back in that moment. Could that be what we mean by feeling loved? And the giving back in the example that I gave happens just by my presence. My aunts are glad that I'm sitting with them. I know that they're glad that I'm sitting with them. And just by sitting there and being there and listening to them and answering what they ask and saying things about what I'm doing in my life and so forth, makes them feel good. So it is an exchange, but it's not one in which one has to do a lot. So there is a return because you feel so warm and so open and so vulnerable and so cherished that something opens up in you and you're able to give a lot more than ever you imagined you could. Yes, he's referring to marasmus, which is illness in which babies die because they're not touched or loved or taken care of. And it seems as if we all did receive some love, although we might not remember it. For instance, for you, love might mean that somebody stood up for you, somebody took your part, somebody protected you. It might mean that somebody held you in a special way. It might mean that somebody mirrored you. For instance, you had your heart set on winning a particular prize and you didn't win it when you were in second grade, and your mother was there at the school on the day that this little contest happened, and your eyes are filled with tears when you finally rejoin your mother at the end of the event, and your mother squats down and looks at you and has her arms embracing you and says, I know you really wanted to win that prize, and I know you really wanted me to be proud that you won it, but you know something? I'm proud of you just because you're you. And you didn't really even have to win that prize to make me proud, because I was even proud before I even came here. And I'll always be proud of you just because you're you. Now that moment of being looked at while I failed and thinking I had nothing to give and being told that I have very much to give and that I don't have to win something or be something in order to be loved, that will set in your mind as the meaning of love. And later in life, you will feel so good when someone says to you, it doesn't matter that you didn't get the promotion, we can still make ends meet, all that matters is that we're together. That said to you when you're 40 will reconnect with that cellular memory, which you may not even remember exactly from second grade, but it's stored in every cell of your body. Your body knows what it means for you to feel loved. It's not what's on the Hallmark card. It's not in anything I could say. It's very specific to you, and every single person in here has a very specific way of being loved. And it's written in every cell of your body, and there's no way to avoid it. As Mae West says, a man's kiss is his signature. There's something about the way that you receive it and the way that you give it that gives away who you are. And when someone comes along who does it just right, you'll feel loved by that person. Of course, you can be fooled, as I said, but it just feels so good, it's hard to say no. Is everybody following? Oh, was there another question on this, Mike? He's saying, can you create new ways of feeling loved? And that's the adult task. It's to expand the templates of love so that it doesn't have to be so narrow, so that you can accommodate the way the other person loves and become appreciative of it. This expands your capacity to receive different kinds of love and even makes you more loving. But nonetheless, you still ask for what you want, and you combine it with accepting the new style. It's a fascinating task, isn't it? Because here you are maybe not knowing what your particular way of being loved is. And I hope that you'll think about it over the week and see if you can come up with it. And notice if you've tried to manipulate people into giving it to you. And if you do figure out what it is, now you can ask for it directly. Ask everybody. Why not? You want to go see Richard Gere? I'll tell you what, I feel much more loved if you stay right here with me. No Richard Gere. And we'll just sit here and we'll do this puzzle of the Grand Canyon. Okay, any final comments or questions? All right, well, I would like to close with a poem, and we've been ending these classes with love poems for obvious reasons. And we may as well go for broke this time and go to Shakespeare. And this poem really has, this sonnet of his has the same theme as the one last time. Talking about how love is changeless, how it doesn't fade, how it lasts and how real it is. And hopefully this will be the subject of our course. To talk about relationships should be to talk about love and what it is. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. It is a star to every wandering bark, whose worth's unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. If this be error, and upon me proved, I never writ, nor no man ever loved. Thank you.